Welcome to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge podcast. My name is Todd DeWalt, and today's going to be a little different. I'm going to start with a story. It was August 2014, and I had spent 2 or 3 hours preparing for this meeting. I was really nervous because, frankly, this meeting would determine the future of my job. When it was time, I drove a few miles to the Applebees where we had agreed to meet, where I had a knot in my stomach. I was jittery, I was nervous. This was going to be one of the most difficult and important conversations of my career. You see, I was meeting with the owner of the company that I worked for to confront him about some things, and frankly, I didn't know if I would have a job when it was over. In today's episode of the podcast, we're going to be talking about the hidden cost of unresolved conflict in your business. The hidden cost of unresolved conflict in your business. Now, there's a disturbing story around these 3 numbers. I want you to, if you've got a piece of paper, jot these 3 numbers down. 2.8, 385 million, and 50%. What do those numbers mean? 2.8 is the number of hours per week that the average employee spends dealing with conflict. The average employee spends 2.8 hours per week dealing with an unresolved conflict. 385 million working days are spent dealing with conflict in the U.S. every year. And chronic unresolved conflict is a decisive factor in at least 50% of departures. So in other words, at least 50% of the people who were surveyed when they left a job said that unresolved conflict was a decisive factor. In fact, chronic unresolved conflict was a decisive factor in why they left. So we're talking about unresolved conflict. And if you don't remember anything else from this, I want you to remember this quote. A man named Daniel Dana wrote a book on conflict resolution, and he said this, quote, "Research suggests that unresolved interpersonal conflict in the workplace is one of the largest reducible productivity costs, yet it is the least identified." End quote. A National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, report says this: interpersonal conflict on the job is identified as one of the top occupational stressors strongly linked to a reduction in workers' psychological and physical health. So, why is unresolved conflict the topic of today's podcast? Well, it's because it is the largest reducible productivity cost in your business, quite possibly, and it is quite possibly one of the top occupational stressors for your employees. And it's causing a reduction in workers' psychological and physical health. We're going to talk about some of the hidden costs, maybe the cost and the impacts that aren't so obvious about unresolved conflict. Now, let's define the difference. We're not talking about all conflict, because some conflict is good. What we're talking about is unresolved conflict. I like a story that Patrick Lencioni talks about in his book, The Advantage. He talks about how some of the most successful companies that he has consulted and coached with, they have these heated debates where they're yelling at each other and there's binders being thrown across the room. That's conflict, but they resolve that conflict. They have heated debate, but then at the end of the meeting, they eventually align on how they're going to move forward, and it's resolved. So we're not talking about conflict, because conflict is good. A complete lack of conflict means you have a bunch of people who don't give a crap, or they're too scared to say anything. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't have any conflict in my organization, well, it's either because the options there are there's conflict there, but you just don't know about it. There is no conflict because people don't care. Or there could be some other options, but conflict in and of itself is not a bad thing. Some conflict is good. We're talking about unresolved conflict. let's talk about some of the hidden costs of unresolved conflict. I've got a list of 7 here. Number 1, the obvious one that we've already touched on, is lost productivity. The average employee, again, spends 2.8 hours per week dealing with unresolved conflict. So think about this. Let's say you have 20 employees in your company, and maybe their hourly rate is $18 an hour, and that is costing you, if you have 20 employees at $18 an hour, and each one is spending an average of 2.8 hours per week dealing with unresolved conflict, that's about $1,000 a week. It's about $52,000 per year. Now, I've been in some organizations where people spent way more than 2.8 hours per week on unresolved conflict. Some people, it seemed like, spent half their time bitching and moaning and complaining about conflicts, and so that has an obvious impact on productivity. Number 2, absenteeism. This is people missing work. The study done by the publishers of the Myers-Briggs Personality Assessment found that 25% of those people surveyed said that they missed work to avoid conflict at work. So what does this look like? This looks like 2 people that are working together on a construction site, and they have an argument, and a few F-bombs are thrown around, and a few threats are made. It's not unusual for one of those guys to miss work the next day, because people, if they have unresolved conflict, they just don't want to be around it. And the easy thing to do there is just lay out one day and miss work. So not only does that person, or you're not getting productivity out of that person, but chances are, if they're on a construction crew, they're on a small team, and that means that crew is not going to be as productive, and somebody else has to shift around to take their place. So there's this domino effect of cost from absenteeism. This one, number 3, is interesting. I'd not heard this term before, but number 3 hidden cost of unresolved conflict is the opposite of absenteeism, and that is presenteeism. Again, presenteeism. Another set of problems may occur when employees with high intent to turnover, and I'm reading from a study. Another set of problems may occur when employees with high intent to quit do not leave the organization. Such employees tend to have lower commitment, be more dissatisfied with their jobs, and reduce morale in the area in which they work. Many such employees, quote, retire on the job, end quote. In other words, they don't do their share of the work, which causes workload problems for others in their area. The rate of presenteeism is estimated to be as much as 3 times higher than the rate of absenteeism. I've seen this before. I've seen people who've made the statement, I'm mad at the boss did me wrong, I'm going to stick it to him. And frankly, what better way to stick it to the boss if you're mad at them? You could quit, and maybe cause some problems, but hey, why not stick around and get paid, spread hatred and dissension and gossip while you're there, maybe screw some stuff up to not only make the boss cover the cost of your labor, but also screw some stuff up that he's going to have to pay for. So presenteeism is huge. Again, just because you're not seeing conflict, just because people aren't quitting or leaving, doesn't mean you don't have conflict. So presenteeism is a big problem. Hidden cost number 4, turnover. This one's relatively intuitive, but 50% of people surveyed that chronic unresolved conflict contributed to them voluntarily leaving an organization. Frankly, I've been there. That's me. I've left at least one job because of unresolved conflict. And I'll tell you a little bit about this. I'm going to tell you the story of a guy named, let's call him Joe. And I'm going to call him Joe because that's his name. I'm not trying to hide this guy's identity. Guy was kind of a jerk. And this guy, Joe, worked for a client that I was working for. He was passive aggressive. He went around setting traps for people on my team. And one of my direct reports quit because of this guy. The guy that I replaced when I came onto the account was removed because of him. And after about 6 months of dealing with it and asking for help from my managers to no avail, I had another opportunity come along, so I left. I tried to resolve this conflict and couldn't get it resolved. I had no interest in working with this guy with this conflict going on. And I didn't trust him. And another opportunity came along, so I left. I didn't want to deal with the stress and anxiety of the situation. And when you have to replace an experienced person with a new hire, like what happened when I left, I had to be replaced. And when you have to replace someone who leaves, you can expect to spend up to 1.5 times their annual salary. So the total cost of replacing someone, and the higher in the organization they are, the higher this cost is. Recruiting, interviewing, lost productivity, training, the mistakes that they're going to make, plus the cost of their salary, lower production, it can equal 1.5 times the annual salary of that person. So it is in your best interest, if there's conflict in your organization, there is a financial incentive for you to get in the middle of that conflict and get it resolved. Hidden cost number 5, employee theft and sabotage. All right, bottom line, construction workers who are pissed off steal stuff and they break stuff. I have firsthand experience with this. There was a situation when I had my own business. A guy named Mike, again, we'll call him Mike because that's his name. I don't have a problem using people's real names, especially if they're that type of person. Well, Mike worked for me, and he was my carpenter foreman, and he'd worked for me for several months. And I found out one day that Mike had not been to work for a few days, and the last few days that he did come to work, he only worked a few hours. And as I dug around, I found out that Mike had been using my company van, the van that I owned, and the tools that I owned, and he was doing side jobs. And not only was he doing side jobs, he was doing side jobs in the neighborhood where I was doing a project that he was supposed to be working on that he wasn't. And not only was he doing those side projects with my tools, he was disparaging me and my company, talking bad about me and my company to the neighbors. So this came to a head one day when, for some reason, Mike passed along a message that he wasn't coming to work and he wasn't going to turn in my van. He wasn't going to turn in my van and my tools. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what he was angling for. But at the end of the day, I contacted him. If you remember the old Nextel phones, I beeped him on the Nextel phone and said, "Mike, this is Todd. If my van and all my tools are not back in my possession by noon today, you're going to be visited by the local police and they're going to offer you some different accommodations. And by the way, you're fired." Well, ultimately I got my van back and I got my tools back. But the thing was, there was a conflict going on there. Mike had a problem. He had a burr in his saddle. He had a beef with me, and this was about 10 years ago, so either I knew about it and I didn't deal with it, or I didn't know about it. Either way, it's a problem. And either way, it cost me, because Mike was a pretty good employee and I had to replace him, but there was also a lot of collateral damage that happened in the process of him leaving. So he attempted theft, and frankly, I'm not even sure what kind of damage was done. It's hard to put a dollar figure on the damage that was done by him going out and doing work for other people. But at the end of the day, if he was happy working for me and everything was good and there was no conflict there, I'm pretty confident none of that would have happened. Number 6, stress and mental health. I'll quote another study. This was a 2005 study done by the Health and Wellness Research Database, and they found that the annual value of lost work time due to stress is $1.7 billion. Furthermore, in a book about the cost of stress, a guy named Ravi Tangri says this, quote, "Employees in high pressure, low control situations or high effort, low reward situations have much greater risks to their physical and mental well-being. Now that sounds a lot like a lot of construction jobs to me. High pressure, low control, high effort, low reward. And those people have a much greater risk to their physical and mental well-being because of stress. Now, you probably know some of the problems with stress, but here they are again. Stress at work leads to a variety of issues, which can include heart disease, asthma, obesity, diabetes, headaches, depression and anxiety, gastrointestinal problems, drug and alcohol abuse, and sleep problems, just to name a few. Many of these conditions will require medical treatment, which results not only in lost work time, but also increased healthcare costs. So just think about someone who has, let's say, they're stressed at work and they develop an ulcer, and they are on your payroll and they're also on your healthcare plan. Well, if they develop a chronic problem, then they're missing work, which means depending on your policy, you're paying them to not be there if they have paid time off. You're not getting any production out of them while they're there. They are racking up healthcare expenses as a result of this issue, and there's the anxiety and the lower quality of life that they're experiencing because of it. And if all of that is happening because of unresolved conflict, that's a real shame. And that's a big problem. Now, the good news here is that you, as the leader, in whatever capacity you're operating in, business owner, project manager, superintendent, foreman, project engineer, wherever you're at in that situation, you can help. You can help. You can take the bull by the horns and you can help by resolving conflict. You don't have to be the big boss, so to speak, to resolve a conflict. Hidden cost number 7, the last one on the list, is opportunity cost. This one is practically invisible, but it's the opportunity cost. All the time and mental energy that you're spending on unresolved, you and your people are spending on unresolved chronic conflict is time, energy, and focus that should be spent, could be spent, solving other problems and growing your business. If you have equipment sitting in the yard or sitting in your warehouse and you're not using it, there's an opportunity cost of that. That could be making you money. Similarly, when let's talk about you, when you are spending 2 hours a day or 2 hours a week, or whatever the case may be, working on unresolved conflict, there's no money to be made working on conflict, trying to resolve conflict. That it's a good thing to do, but if you're dealing with the consequences of unresolved conflict, you're not making any money. You need to get that issue put to bed so that you can spend your time on more profitable endeavors. So, just to recap, the 7 hidden costs of unresolved conflict: lost productivity, number 1. Number 2, absenteeism. Number 3, presenteeism. That's a sneaky one. Number 4, turnover. Number 5, theft and sabotage. Number 6, stress and mental health and the associated healthcare cost. And number 7, opportunity cost. So why is there so much unresolved conflict? We know conflict's not a bad thing, and frankly, the nature of construction lends itself to conflict. You have people working in different situations every day. As a project progresses, it's different. It's not like you're working in a fast food restaurant or a factory line where you can Six Sigma everything into a workflow. It's very dynamic. You're working against the elements and mud and the weather and snow and heat. It's built around conflict. You're confronting a lot of challenges. So why don't we deal with these conflicts? What is it about conflict that makes it go unresolved? Well, frankly, the number one reason is fear. Bottom line, it's fear. It's a fear of conflict. So let's go back to my story. I was meeting with the owner of the company that I worked for to let him know about some things that were going on in the company that I didn't agree with, and I saw them as a big problem, and I don't think he knew about, and I felt like he really did need to know about. See, the deal was there was an employee who was causing division, he was stirring up problems, and he was also causing some good people to leave the company, among other things. I won't get into a lot of the details, but there was one individual who was causing a lot of problems, and there was like a rock being thrown in a pond. There was no part of the company that was not affected by this individual. Now, the sticky wicket with this situation is that the person behind most of the problems had a very close relationship with the owner. They went way back, very close relationship. So that's what made it very difficult. It's very difficult to go tell the owner of a business or anyone, hey, this person who you're really close to and you go way back with is doing this and this and this and this, and you need to know about this, and something has to be done. It's like, we're all in this boat and we're paddling across the lake, and there's a guy in the back. This guy's back there drilling holes in the boat. Not only is he not paddling the boat to help us get where we need to go, he's drilling holes in the boat, and we're all going to go down. And you need to know about it, and something has to happen. So that was the complication. And so here were some of the thoughts that were going through my head. Here are some of the fears that I was dealing with as I addressed this situation, as I got ready for it. And this is why I was so nervous. So I asked questions like this. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm seeing this wrong? What if the owner gets emotional and upset? What if he just breaks down on me? I mean, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? What if they come back at me and start pointing out the mistakes I made? What if in the process, what if when they hear these things, they get mad and they attack me? What do I do then? What if this makes the situation worse? Maybe it would just be better just to leave it alone. Maybe I'm going to throw gas on a fire here. It's not good now, but sometimes what you see and what you know is much more comfortable than the unknown. So what if it gets worse? Other fears that we have when it comes to confronting somebody at work is if you're let's say you are going to confront one of your direct reports or a peer, somebody on your level, you might wonder, well, what if this person goes over my head? Or what if they try to take me down? What if, this one's happened to me, what if I confront this person and they start crying? I've done that. I've had to let an individual go, actually a few of them, and they cried. And that is incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. But that is not an unusual fear when it comes to confronting things. What if they cry? What if I can't handle the situation and I get stuck? What if I start going down the road and we just come to loggerheads and we can't get it resolved and we just get mired down in this thing? What if I lose my temper? What if I can't control myself? What if I get mad and I just lose my cool and I just lose my cool? I just lose my temper. What's going to happen? What if I screw this thing up? What if I try to address it, I try to fix it? What if I just screw it up? What are people going to think of me? Are they going to think I can't handle the tough situations? That's a common one if you're in management, especially if you're a young leader working your way up through the organization. Here's a really common one. What if people think I'm a fraud? What if they think I'm faking it? And what if I try to address this thing and people realize that I shouldn't even be in this position? What if in the process of confronting this situation, it becomes apparent that I'm a fraud? I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Now, it turns out that a lot of people have this fear of being found out to be a fraud. It's called Imposter Syndrome. If you're in leadership, it's not unusual to deal with Imposter Syndrome. What if, and it sounds like, people are, if you do this, people are going to find out you don't know what the hell you're doing. Or, yeah, you've been successful, but you're just lucky. Or, yeah, you've been successful, but it's just because you have really good people. So that's a common fear that you're just going to have to work through. So how did I get over these fears and confront the issues. Did the fears go away? I would like to say yes, that I had a rational conversation with myself and just said, you know what, there's nothing to worry about, it's all good. Well, that's just not the reality. The fears were still there. The anxiety was still there. The knot in the stomach was still there. And even right up until the last minute, it was so tempting just to pull the plug and just say, nope, it's too risky. But I did it anyway. See, the fear didn't go away, but what I did something that I call reframing the situation and tried to think about it differently. So when you're in a tough situation like this, especially when you're dealing with conflict, what's helpful is to reframe the situation. Step back, look at it from a different angle, and reframe it. Get out of your shoes and look at it from a different way. So here are some reframing questions to ask yourself to help push through the fear and help you see the big picture. So think about it this way. If this person was about to this person you're going to confront, if they were about to make a significant financial decision and you knew it was a mistake, you knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that it was a mistake and they were going to lose money and it was going to affect them in a negative way, would you let them know? Would you be afraid to tell them, hey, don't do that? That's a bad idea. Another question is, if there was an issue that was putting the company or this person's livelihood and your livelihood in jeopardy. So if there was some situation that was putting the company that you work for, the person you're going to confront, their livelihood, and your livelihood in jeopardy, and this person didn't know about it, would you tell them about it? Because that's the reality. Unresolved conflict is affecting your entire company, your entire team. Therefore, it's affecting you, and it's putting your livelihood at risk. So you got to realize, here's what I realized about conflict is it doesn't go away. It generally doesn't get better all by itself. And if you think that, if you're wondering if you have to deal with conflict, the answer is yes. The question is not, am I going to have to deal with this conflict or is it going to go away? The question is, how big am I going to let this thing get before I deal with it? Am I going to let it just grow legs and hair, and am I going to let this thing run like a bull through a china shop through my team and cause me all kinds of hell and torment before I deal with it? Or am I going to deal with it when it's small? So it's not a matter of if you're going to have to deal with it, it's how quickly are you going to deal with it? How big are you going to let it get before you deal with it? It's also good to remind yourself that people in an organization who can deal with the tough situations, the people who can have the tough conversations, are extremely valuable to an organization, because it seems like everybody is afraid of conflict. So just remind yourself, this is the tough job. This is going to help me in my career. It's going to help, think about it this way, it's going to help you in your career. You're going to develop skills that will make you very valuable when you are able to deal with confrontation and get conflicts resolved. Because the people in your team, they know about it and they just wish somebody would make this problem go away. And they'll be so appreciative that you stood up to the task. Your team they're going to see you as in a different way. If you're going to step up and resolve that situation, they will appreciate you. Your direct reports will appreciate it. Your peers will appreciate it. Your management will appreciate it. The owner of your company will appreciate it. And they'll see you as the go-to guy or gal who's operating in the best interest of the team, the company, and even that person. So what did I do? Let's go back to my story. What did I do? What did I do to deal with and work through these fears and address this situation? So here's what I did. I framed the conversation around the idea that we as the company, were responsible for the livelihood of around 50 families, and I felt that this issue was a threat to the owner's livelihood, his business, his family, and the 50 families that we were responsible for supporting. And let me just I'll read some of the letter that I put together and just read to him. I didn't try to wing this. I didn't try to go from memory. So I just typed up a memo or a letter and handed him a copy, and I read a copy, and we just worked through it. So I'll just read you parts of it. First, let me begin by saying that these are difficult and uncomfortable topics to address. Nevertheless, for the sake of the company and the approximately 50 families that depend on the company, I feel strongly that they need to be addressed. First, I want to address some issues as if I was a third-party advisor who was giving you advice on how to best plan for the future of the company and your family. So you see that? I framed it. I took myself out of the middle of the situation, and I said, I'm going to address this as if I was a third-party consultant or an advisor who was giving you advice on how to best plan for the future of the company and your family. Notice I keep talking about families because it's important. Ultimately, we're all working to support our families. So it's very important to provide that as a frame of reference. So then I laid out I said there are a few very important and very tough decisions that need to be made. This is outlining, this is what needs to happen. This is the call to action, so to speak, that if I were a third-party advisor, these are the things that need to happen. Then I said, next are some requests from my personal standpoint. I was concerned for the company's standpoint, but I also said, here are some concerns I have from my standpoint. And I laid out two requests for myself of information that I needed from him. Then lastly, I said, I want to let you know that I'm very concerned about this person being in a leadership position with the company, and I laid out some concerns that I had about observable facts. These were observable facts, things that had happened, they were documented. I did not speculate, I did not talk about motives, I did not make accusations. They were clean-cut, observable facts about things that had happened, and things about his personality and why that was a problem. Ultimately, I said my core values involving dealing with employees and customers are very different. They're diametrically opposed. And I even said this, I'm not saying whose values are right, but we have opposing values in some areas, and it's not going to work. And I wrapped it up by saying I want to continue to grow the business, to develop our people, and strengthen our relationships with our customers, but the issues listed above are a hindrance to that. And frankly, I've decided that I'm not interested in continuing to fight that resistance long term. I'm asking for you to help me figure out how we go forward with these issues. I didn't make ultimatums. I didn't make demands. I said, I'm asking you for help on how to solve these issues. So that's how I addressed that situation. Again, I framed it around the idea that we're responsible for families. Let's zoom out a couple of frames. Let's look at the big picture. Our customers, our families, our employees, and I kept it clean cut to observable facts. And I asked for his help. And when I prepared for this meeting, before I had the conversation, I made sure that I had his best interest in mind, that I had the interest of the rest of the employees in mind before I had the conversation. I was angry about some things. I was just angry about some things. I was pissed off about the way this individual was acting and had taken some things personally. He'd done some things personally to me, but I had to make sure that none of that entered the conversation because that was my issue. I had to approach this with his best interest in mind. I was looking at the owner's situation, and I wanted to make sure that I had the right mindset before I approached that situation. So how did it go? How did this go? I put together this conversation. I reframed the conversation. I presented the issues, the observations, asked for his help. How did it go? Well, that's a story for another day. We're out of time today. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? This unresolved conflict is such a huge problem. Again, Daniel Dana said that Unresolved interpersonal conflict in the workplace is one of the largest reducible productivity costs, yet it is the least identified. There are so many problems that are a result of unresolved conflict in business. I'll bet if you pulled out a piece of paper and you took 120 seconds, if you took 2 minutes, I'll bet you could write down half a dozen unresolved conflicts that are going on in your organization right now. So where do we go from here? Well, listen, I hope you see, and I'm pretty confident that you see that this is a big problem. And if you are leading an organization or if you own a construction company, it's a big problem that is very possibly costing you big money. So I put together some resources to help you get better at resolving conflict, because let's face it, it's not a matter of if you're going to deal with conflict, it's a matter of when and how often. You need to get the mindset that if you are in leadership or in management, you are going to be dealing with constant conflict. There will constantly be things that have to be confronted. If you're not confronting things, then you're not going to be in leadership. And if you hate conflict, then you're going to be in for a long ride if you're in leadership or if you own a business. So this is a big problem, and I put together some resources. So what I've done is I've developed a conflict resolution framework that will provide a step-by-step guide for you, along with some reminders and tips to help you when you need to address the conflict. And again, it's not a matter of if, but when. This is not something that you may have to use sometime. You will have to confront it. You will. And I'm telling you, you can become good at resolving conflict. Conflict does not have to be something that keeps you up at night. You can handle it in a healthy way. You can handle it without getting mad. You can handle it without making people cry. You can confront things and deal with conflict so that when everybody leaves the table, leaves the conversation, they feel better about it, and the relationship is not destroyed. You haven't burned any bridges. And in fact, I've got a 1 or 2 page framework that I put together because I kept running into conflict. I put this thing together that it's a step-by-step process when you need to confront something. It's the "we need to have a talk" document is what we called it. And in fact, a good friend of mine who now works for a religious organization, he shared this framework with this organization, and they adopted this as their conflict resolution policy. So it's in the official policy. They said, hey, that's a lot better than what we've got. What we've got doesn't work, but this framework is good. So it's tested, it's tried, it will help you work through conflict with employees, with peers, with managers. Again, this is the framework that I use to confront the owner of the company. You can also use it with customers, subcontractors. Hey, you might even try it with your spouse. No guarantees on that, but this is a good framework for conflict resolution. So if you want this framework and you want some more resources on the topic of how to resolve conflict, I've put together some good stuff. I want to get it in your hands. Go to constructionleadingedge.com/conflict and sign up there. Put your email address in. I'll email that document to you. And when you sign up, you'll also get a few emails from me with some additional information that I think will help you become a conflict resolving ninja. It's going to help you out. Hey, I'm going to try something here. If you're away from your desk, or if you're on your phone, a lot of you are listening to this podcast on the phone, and if you want this document but you can't remember the web address and you don't have anything to write it down with, just whip out your phone, do this. Send me a text the word conflict to my cell phone, 859-409-8849, and I'll send you the link on your phone so you can sign up. Again, send me a text with the word conflict. Doesn't have to be spelled right. If it's anything close, then I'll know what you're looking for. Send it to 859-409-8849, and I'll send you a link on your phone so you can sign up. Lastly, if you like the podcast, if you're getting value out of this, if you think it kicks ass at any level, do me a favor, go to the podcast player of your choice, iTunes or Stitcher or whatever you're listening to this podcast on. Leave a rating or review on iTunes or whatever it is that you're listening to. Leave a rating and review. That'll get the word out. That'll move it up in the rankings so more people will find out about it. Share this with folks on social media. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, I'm at ConLeadEdge. And if you just want to send me an email the old-fashioned way, todd@constructionleadingedge.com. All right, well, that wraps up this episode on Unresolved Conflict. There may be another episode on this coming in the future. If you're liking this information, let me know. If you think it sucks, let me know that too. Until next time, I'm Todd DeWalt. Thanks for listening.